Hi guys, in this discussion of the book How I Became a Hindu by Goel, we are in the last chapter called Nightmare of Nehruism, and here Goel specifically diagnoses the disease and the problem called Nehruism. It may be remembered that Pandit Nehru was by no means a unique character, nor is Nehruism a unique phenomenon for that matter. Such weak-minded persons and such subservient thought processes have been seen in all societies that have suffered the misfortune of being conquered and subjected to alien rule for some time. There are always people in all societies who confuse superiority of armed might with superiority of culture, who start despising themselves as belonging to an inferior breed and end by taking to the ways of the conqueror in order to regain self-confidence, who begin finding faults with everything they have ever inherited from their forefathers, and who finally join hands with every force and factor which is out to subvert their ancestral society. Viewed in this perspective, Pandit Nehru was no more than a self-alienated Hindu, and Nehruism is not much more than Hindu baiting born out of and sustained by a deep-seated sense of inferiority vis-a-vis Islam, Christianity and the modern West. Muslim rule in medieval India had produced a whole class of such self-alienated Hindus. They had interpreted the superiority of Muslim arms as symbolic of the superiority of Muslim culture. Over a period of time, they had come to think and behave like the conquerors and to look down upon their own people. They were most happy when employed in some Muslim establishment so that they might pass as members of the ruling elite. The only thing that could be said in their favor was that for one reason or the other, they did not convert to Islam and merge themselves completely in Muslim society. But for that same reason, they had become Trojan horses of Islamic imperialism and worked for pulling down the cultural defenses of their own people. The same class walked over to the British side when British arms became triumphant. They retained most of those anti-Hindu prejudices which they had borrowed from their Muslim masters and cultivated some more which were contributed by the British establishment and the Christian missions. That is how the British rule became a divine dispensation for them. The most typical product of this double process was Raja Ram Mohan Roy. Now, for people who are shocked and surprised that Raja Ram Mohan Roy has been painted in such a bad light, you all really should read his letter to the British where he begs and pleads them for English education and denigrates his own cultural Indic texts. And especially for people who think Savarkar did a very bad thing by asking for mercy for his life, really need to read this letter because it will make you puke if you read the tonality of the letter written by Raja Ram Mohan Roy. Fortunately for Hindu society, however, the self-alienated Hindu had not become a dominant factor during the Muslim rule. His class was confined to the urban centers where alone Muslim influence was present in a significant measure. The number of this bastard breed was few and far between in the countryside where Muslim rule had never struck strong roots. Secondly, the capacity of Islam for manipulating human minds by means of ideological warfare was less than poor. It worked mostly by means of brute force and aroused strong resistance. This is a very important line now. Finally, throughout the period of Muslim rule, the education of Hindu children had remained in Hindu hands by and large, so the self-alienated Hindu existed and functioned only on the margins of Hindu society and seldom in the mainstream. All this changed with the coming of the British conquerors and the Christian missionaries. Their influence was not confined to the urban centers because their outposts had spread to the countryside as well. Secondly, they were equipped with a stock of ideas and the means for communicating them which were far more competent as compared to the corresponding equipment of Islam. And what had made the big difference in the long run was that the education of Hindu children was taken over by the imperialist and missionary establishments. As a cumulative result, the crop of self-alienated Hindus multiplied fast and several-fold. Add to that the blitzkrieg against authentic Hindus and in favor of the self-alienated Hindus mounted by the communist apparatus built up by Soviet imperialism. It is no less than a wonder in human history that Hindu society and culture not only survived the storm but also produced a counterattack under Maharshi Dayananda, Swami Vivekananda, Sri Aurobindo and Mahatma Gandhi, such as earned for them the esteem of the world at large. Even so, the self-alienated Hindus continued to multiply and flourish in a cultural milieu mostly dominated by the modern West, and they came to the top in the post-independence period when no stalwart of the Hindu resurgence remained on the scene. The power and prestige which Pandit Nehru acquired within a few years after the death of Sardar Patel had nothing to do with his own merits, either as a person or as a political leader, or as a thinker. They were the outcome for a long historical process which had brought to the fore a whole class of self-alienated Hindus. Pandit Nehru would have never come to the top if this class had not been there, and this class would not have become dominant or remained so had it not been sustained by establishments in the West, particularly that in the Soviet Union. It is not an accident that the Nehruvian regime has behaved like the British Raj in most respects. The Nehruvians have looked at India not as a Hindu country but as a multiracial, multireligious and multicultural cockpit. They have tried their best, like the British, to suppress the mainstream society and culture with the help of minorities, that is, the colonies crystallized by imperialism. They have also tried to fragment Hindu society and create more minorities in the process. In fact, it has been their whole time occupation to eliminate every expression of Hindu culture, to subvert every symbol of Hindu pride, and persecute every Hindu organization in the name of protecting the minorities. Hindus have been presented as monsters who will commit cultural genocide if allowed to come to power. The partition of the country was brought about by Islamic imperialism, but the Nehruvians blamed it shamelessly on what they stigmatized as Hindu communalism. A war on the newly born Republic of India was waged by the communists in the interests of Soviet imperialism. But the Nehruvians were busy apologizing for these traitors and running hammer and tongs after the RSS. There are many more parallels between the British Raj on the one hand and the Nehruvian regime on the other. I'm not going into details because I am sure that the parallels will become obvious to anyone who applies his mind to the subject. The Nehruvian formula is that this is a very important line because it still applies to this day. The Nehruvian formula is that Hindus should stand accused in every situation, no matter who is the real culprit,